just wanted to welcome everybody to ContinuuCon. I want to thank everyone who also showed up last night for an unofficial event, which was really fun. This is the first time ContinuuCon is here in Pittsburgh. We're happy to have you here in our hometown. Pittsburgh is known for many things, but the thing it is not known for, and it should be, is we have an amazing underground electronic music community. There are hundreds of electronic musicians who live in Pittsburgh, and they're all friendly and welcoming and super talented, and we got to see some of them last night. That'll be on the, we did have video, as there are videos of all these talks, so those will be available afterwards. But anyway, this evening is our opening reception. There's food. After Lippold and Ed give their talks, there is also some wine. Apparently it's maybe difficult to understand if you've had a few too many. But anyway, so please enjoy that as well. This evening is just about, we have two short talks and a demonstration, and this evening is really about the Continuum community getting together for an evening just to hang out. So with that said, I'll let it to you.
Okay, thank you. It goes without saying that organizing such an event is a huge amount of work, and it's always great to, for a nerd like me to be around musicians, so I love it. Okay, so I was going to give a short talk just about what's new. Most of what's new is boring little things, like I spend my time, maybe if I mount the neoprene this way or adjust this or that, or I put the cell phone tape a little bit over. So it's sort of hard to talk about those things, but there's some things that I can talk about that are new since the last ContinuuCon. So the big thing that I would like to make a deal out of is specialty synths. The name is a little funny because if somebody makes a synthesizer like this, like we call it the Haken matrix, and they'll call it, we have Loris, the Loris synth, or we have the ratio synth, we have various ones like that, so we'll know them by that name. But I need some name for what are the underpinnings of this stuff, and why did we do it? Why do specialty synths? So, what is the whole thing here? We coined this new word, and what does it really mean? The Haken matrix is great for instrument designers. And this word instrument designer is starting to be used by Hollywood. It's sort of a little unclear what it means. But in any case, if you look at Dune credits, they use it there. It exists. So an instrument designer is, in our case, they're the people that use the Haken matrix to design an instrument. And much like a violin builder or something is generally not a very good violinist, but they have incredible skills in some other area. And they probably play violin well enough to make some decisions, but that's about it. They would never, their skill area is really quite separate. It's a similar thing for instrument designers. It's really, there's a lot of engineering skill and a lot of engineering knowledge in that, which is related to, but not the same as what we would normally consider sound design. So, but what we've had for the last years is this idea of Haken matrix. You make an instrument. We call it a preset, but really those presets are instruments. They have very few customizable parameters. All of the strength of those presets is how you interact with it with your fingers. And unlike a lot of other systems, each preset has different parameters. Some don't have any. Some of them have something you can control with a pedal or with some other way of controlling it or set it up in the editor. But really, it's a completed instrument, and the person who loads one of these presets is loading it as a performer. They're not doing sound design with it. They're going to perform with it. They're going to learn, okay, this particular instrument, what really makes it come alive, what really makes it speak, work on different playing techniques for that instrument. So the Haken matrix is great for instrument designers, but maybe not so much sound designers. And this first thing here sounds almost condescending, but it isn't meant to be. The Haken matrix skills are not common among sound designers and must be learned. And that isn't just the gamers get good thing. It really is people, there are very skilled people out there that can do sound design, but a lot of their skill actually is in hearing something and deciding, is this appropriate or not? And that's great. In fact, you can know all sorts of engineering and not know that. Trust me, I'm familiar with that. So the skills are really not common among sound designers. It takes a lot to learn them, but even more so, even once you've learned them, the engineering basically process that goes into Egan matrix and the planning that goes into it. There's no such thing as, say, people always ask, can we do random patching? It makes no sense. It's like if you had a word processor and can you do, put random letters in it, right, and see if you get a nice novel. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't make sense. But it turns out that all this planning that goes into it really does distract from something that's well established, and that's this immediacy, in knob twisting systems. Because in a knob twisting system, many different synthesizers, I don't have to name them, but you've got people learn sort of what the knobs are, and they might even have names for them, or they might just sonically know, but they can really dial in what they want, they can adjust it as they play, and listen to get exactly what they want. And that gets in the way. If that person is thinking about what am I going to have for dinner, or I need to get my car repaired, and how much is that going to cost? That gets in the way of their sound design. But so does the sound. Thinking these engineering things that in a way are necessary for the Egan matrix. I'm extremely proud of the Egan matrix. No way am I putting it down, but it does have this thing that it's great for instrument designers, but really the sound design process it's not ideal for it. So the idea here was, okay, what do we do to make it so that it, the specialty synths are intended to provide an environment that's familiar to sound designers and make it much more accessible. And it's more than that. Like, for instance, we've had this Genie oscillator now for I don't know how long, at least a year. When Christoph started on it, I don't know when it was. 2018. But anyway, so and then sometime later, I made a more compact version of it for in the Egan matrix, so I wouldn't use up as many resources and stuff. But basically, we've had this for a long time. We're all very smart people. And until 2 weeks ago, when Ed finished it, it has been barely explored. Because it's just too hard. There's all these possibilities, but until you have somebody who decides, okay, in this case it was Ed, and maybe it's not perfect yet, but it's a lot better. He is a bunch of controls that you'll see, and with some knob twisting and with some, you can very quickly dial in a bunch of different sounds, which you guys are going to demonstrate, right, in your talk, I think.
Yeah, well, not the newer piece that we're going to do. Yeah, I'll demonstrate it.
Yeah. Tomorrow, sometime during ContinuuCon, that'll be shown.
Oh yeah, tomorrow we're going to do that.
Yeah. And it's very important, because if you imagine the same process, if you're familiar with the Egan matrix, doing the same process in the Egan matrix just isn't realistic. Okay, so specialty synths in the Egan matrix. So you got a synth designer now. We got to have all these different words. But a synth designer is a person who uses the Egan matrix to make a specialty synth, which is really sort of underpinning of a preset that's quite open-ended. It's not totally open-ended. If you think about, say, a modular synthesizer, right? Somebody put a lot of thought into, well, if I'm going to have 6 knobs and I'm going to have 4 inputs and 3 outputs, what do I actually map to these? Because there's a whole world of possibilities. And the person who designed that thing, if they did a good job, it makes for an incredible synthesizer, but a very different experience than maybe somebody who had just picked a different set of parameters. And whether we have a great set of parameters yet, Ed will, I think in full humility, say, yeah, we don't know for sure, but boy, is it pretty impressive what we can do already. Now, the synth designer has and we didn't make the job any easier. The easy isn't part of this. The synth designer, has to make all these decisions about what's in there, but also has to make a custom GUI. So the idea is we aren't doing this thing where, we're going to have one size fits all front end. The synthesizers are really different things. They feel different, and if you go and buy different modulars, they look very different. They do different things. They come from different places and different and that's fine. That's the way the synthesis will be too. You will see some common widgets among the ones we got. Well, we're just starting out. Now, you will see some very different thing from Paul Dempsey, who, of course, started before we formalized any of this, and in the VCV rack, and what we're doing in Max. But, you'll see some commonalities, and those aren't necessary. They're just what we have right now. So, the specialty synths, they supply this immediacy in sound design. You can, I was just very impressed that Ed could figure out what knobs to twist to try to match well, you'll see that. I think they'll demonstrate that. But the specialty synths have an immediacy in sound design that really let you do timbral exploration without all the other stuff. Somebody has to design the specialty synth. Somebody has to make the GUI for it. There's good there's good user interfaces systems for MIDI out there, so it's not that but it's a lot of work to make one. And this ContinuuCon, you'll see 4 of them. These are sort of in the order of which people worked on them, I think. Paul Dempsey, long before this was formalized, I think he'll have good stories for you. What he had to go through. Has the HC1 in the VCV rack. And then we got the LoRa synth, which is in Max, the ratio synth, which is Max, and the Genie synth. Okay, so this is kind of cool. Unlike the specialty presets of the past, we've had this word specialty before. It's kind of a nice generic word because, sort of positive, but sort of unclear what it means. Anyway, we had specialty presets in the past, which I programmed. Actually, we started off before we had the Egan matrix, before Ed came up with these ideas. He would design things, prototype them, and then I would try to implement them in code, and I would almost get it right, and it was a very frustrating procedure. Anyway, unlike those things which had to be hand programmed by me, now anyone who wants to take the time, it's a time commitment, but anyone who has to take the time and learn the skills can make a specialty synth. And it'll be a lot less painful than it was for Paul. Okay. So what else is there? So that's the idea of the specialty synth. Other developments. I'm just going to rattle off these things. We have a refined reverb. Do you want to show a long reverb?
I actually don't have it.
Okay. It doesn't matter.
But if you were here last night, and you might say that all that ambient sound that I got, that's all related to the improved reverb algorithm.
And the reverb is actually, I've been told by people that have actually heard that, we're improving it. That's, they really like it the way it is. Don't change it. Well, anyway, for very long reverbs, it really wasn't great before. You can make a long dark reverb maybe, but in any case, it's much refined now. It's a matter of, there's other little things like the tan-H function has made it into the master section and into the oscillator filter section. Tan-H is just another one of these soft clipping things, except it actually is really useful for getting analog-like sound. You can try to do the same thing with other approximations. Again, a lot of these things are due to Christophe, who just said, hey, just put this in. We have a bit crush, which people tell me is quite useful. There's a granulate delay, which again is something that Christophe instigated. It lets you do traditional pitch shifting things. We have a very fancy pitch shifter already built in with the harmonic manipulator, but it needs to know so much about the source signal. In fact, like that violin sound is 100 base. That whole thing is based on 150 milliseconds of one note. It manipulates that, but it knows a lot about that 150 milliseconds, and it's quite useless for live input. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's difficult to use for live input, and this is something that worked quite well for live input and for lots of other things. So we have that. We have, as part of this supporting more open-ended presets, basically things that are going to underline, are going to be used in the Egan matrix as the underpinnings for a specialty synth. We doubled the number of formulas, so you got A prime through V prime. In addition to that, we've got 7 places in the formulas where you can select macros, and there's 90 macros now. So for up from 6, well, the macros are sort of different. I mean, the idea here is that these are things that are controlled through the GUI that's custom made for a specialty synth. And you will see a lot more about that. There's a duplex mode, which, for those of you who know the details, I don't want to get into it too much, but there's you have this blend function. If you want to play both extremes of the blend at the same time, there's a duplex mode to do that for you. Okay, so there's lots of little things like that. There's a MIDI configuration protocol. This is something that you won't notice unless you're digging into the making your own interfaces and talking to the eigenmatrix. But it had evolved over since the mid '80s and needed an overhaul. So at this point, the MIDI protocol now only uses AF and BF messages, which, for those of you who aren't into hex, is continuous controllers and polyphonic aftertouch on channel 16. It turns out that polyphonic aftertouch is a nice one. It's not useful for MPE, except on the master channel. But in general, MPE doesn't have any need for it. It's not polyphonic on a channel. It doesn't make any sense. So polyphonic aftertouch and those messages, it's a much cleaned up protocol.
Thank you. That's going to make it so much.
Oh yeah, well, unfortunately I talked to Paul at the right time before other things came up. He was saying, yeah, you know, these continuous controllers you got where you got different bit fields that are unrelated parameters. Historically, I was running out of controller numbers, because you only get 128 of them per channel, and you can't take over every MIDI channel, or you're not going to coexist with anybody. Anyway, I had this long history of stuff that was, needlessly complicated is a nice way to say that, basically impossible to implement. And there's better documentation. Yeah. So it's really good. And all the editor, we eat our own dog food. All the editor, everything uses the same protocol that you would use in specialty synths. So if you really wanted to, you could make a specialty synth that does everything the editor does, and you would be insane. What you want to do instead is pick a subset. We're working on a C++ version of Juice. I mean, Max is built over Juice also, but just so this silly program starts up faster and works on more platforms and stuff. That's still going to be a long time. Partly because just where can we, what resources can we apply where? And anyway, so that is happening though. We have a new triactive pedal. This is funny because we've had so many different iterations of wanting to shift up and down. The idea is very old. It's from the 1920s or 1930s, from the trautonium. The idea is that you park your hands. If you want to play a very fast multi-octave thing, you park your hands on the continuum without rounding, of course. Rounding is cheating. Get a keyboard if you want that. You park your fingers in a position which can be any tuning system, anything you want, and then you can very quickly switch octaves without moving your hands at all. So theoretically, much faster than you could on a keyboard because you don't even have to move your hands. You're just vertically moving your fingers, and you've got an octave up and octave down. So over 3 octaves, you can play on a continuous pitch instrument accurately and all that good stuff. And there are some examples of Oscar Sala doing such a thing, where we can argue whether they were faked or not. We don't. But in any case, we've gone through many iterations of pedals like this and ended up with something very simple, a 3D printed cradle, which was designed by Ed, and some Yamaha switches, and then some adapters. If you want to go into the pedal jacks, there's one adapter. If you want to go into the I2C jack, because your pedals are already used for sustain plus neutral, then you can use this. But a very, very simple setup. But it works great. Anyway, so it seems small, but it's a use case of the continuum that matters, and is a very small use case. Yes, you.
One thing about it, in addition to mention, people haven't tried it, is that if you're pressing both down at the same time, you are at normal on the keyboard. So if you lean a little bit to the left, you'll go down, and in the middle, when you're both pressed down, it's the same as if you're not pressing either.
Yeah,
Back and forth is actually.
There's some help there, but realistically, even Oscar Sala, who's certainly the world genius at this stuff. I saw videos. Luckily, I could use my German. I saw videos that he did when he was older, and he couldn't do it. It's extremely hard to coordinate your feet with very fast notes, but he could do it when he was younger, and I believe that he could.
Lippold, I'm wondering if everyone here knows who Oscar Sala is.
Do you want to describe? You're probably better at.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
No, he was a player, very, an amazing, we actually were introduced to him, I was introduced to him, how amazing he was, because he played this particular piece. He played a master player of the trautonium, and he made his own version of it, sort of expanded out, and became this, and he became famous for just being a virtuoso on this particular instance, electronic instrument, played with orchestras, and Rob at one ContinuuCon introduced us to him playing this Gensmer piece, and it's just like, it's mind blowing. You listen to this. And what year was that recording from?
I think that one was in the 30s and 40s.
And I'm listening to this and saying, how did they do this? Was it like,
Well, I was convinced that the Nazis faked that recording. So there was
he could play so fast.
it was off of 14 different. They had 14 different recordings, and this record was put together in the 70s. And actually, now I'm convinced, no, this was real. Except they took the best of a whole bunch of plays, and Rob is not sure yet whether that's true or not. But in any case, if it was faked long after the Nazis. It's not their brilliant doing. It's a very unfortunate with the trautonium, of course, because the Germans were very supportive of building all the vacuum tubes and all the things he needed until the war started as this cover-up for the war, just like the interstate highways or the Autobahn was a cover-up for the war. And making Volkswagens for everybody in the country was, they were all recalled, of course, for war efforts. So it was all sort of a very sad time in history. But in any case, for a while there, Trautwein had incredible resources and did incredible things. I mean, he had a bass band, so not a heterodyning, oscillators in that synthesizer, and had 2 bandpass filters that were fixed frequencies, which is something that people didn't figure out too much later. Yes.
Trautwein or Sala?
This is Trautwein, the guy who originally did it. Then Sala really took it on from there. Sala was a physicist. He had a lot of knowledge. He figured out this was great and was a good performer. But one bright spot is that Martineau, sharp dude, and of a very few people in the world figured out what was cool about this. But the Martineau also had built into it these 2 resonances or 2 bandpass and fixed bandpasses. But you got to realize, like, this thing about having drawbars for harmonics, people did that for decades and decades later. There's just total confusion. It's as if your head shrinks when you play a higher note. It doesn't make any sense to set up a thing like that. But lots and lots of instruments did that. So it was way ahead of its time. But because unfortunately the Nazis, well, anybody who had a Jewish grandma, of course, was in trouble. And then there's also the problems of their trying to show that German culture was superior and stuff got so much in the way that basically all that technology was forgotten. And at this point, yeah, it's sort of a sad history, except for Martineau, who kept at least part of it alive. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add is that it was the reason we don't really know, because he was ultimately very secret.
Oh, Sala was. Yes, Sala was a great performer. Yeah.
So these playing techniques, it's fun. It's an interesting philosophy of life. What are you here for, if not, better humanity on a certain level? And he kept everything to himself, and it died with him. So.
Well, he was sad when he was older that nobody else knew this, but it's like, well, if you don't have any proteges, oh well. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but there were some very cool ideas there in a very sad part of history. So that's the triactive pedal. I mentioned this because we must have gone through 6 iterations now of this, and the thing we ended up with is so obvious. It's hard to tell, like, why didn't we do this on day 1? Who knows? Continuum osmos bracket, you can see them there. It's the thing that holds the continuum of the osmos. My dream is that people treat it as one instrument. So you really have 2 manuals. You used to have 2 manuals just for different tunings and harpsichords and stuff. But here, I think there may be a future for that. We'll find out. CVC together with the expander. You got 32 analog voltages. This is due to Josh, who's going crazy with analog stuff. And is willing to patch more than most people. But anyway, so if you want it, it's possible to have 32 outputs from your CVC now. The USB powered Continuum. This is really just, I've been spending a lot of time, well, actually, here's a cool thing, by the way, which this is sad. This never saw the light of day. This was something that I'd done, you can tell it was for thick Continuum. It was a 6X board for thick Continuums. It would have been great, but during COVID, there were so many chip shortages, I couldn't get the parts. So that was the end of that. But anyway, I did make some of these. They just, I could never really produce them. After that, I went to the new Shark, which was available, actually. I could get that. And so due to COVID shortages, I used this new chip. It's a lot less parts. You know, it's actually kind of nice. But yeah, it's purely due to parts. If you gave Ed or anybody that's an expert, or Rob, or anybody who's played a lot, even Josh, you give them a 6X or an 8X, they won't be able to tell. They can play it for weeks. So it's kind of sad because now people are really worried, oh, do I have a 6X or an 8X? It doesn't matter. In any case, we do have this new chip that was due to COVID shortages. There's other things on here where I've spent a lot of effort on getting rid of all. When we receive boards in Haken Audio International Headquarters there in my basement, about almost half of them don't work right away. And you know, this has always been this way. And then you screw around with them, screw around with them. Anyway, so when I retired, that was one of my goals, is solve these problems. And so been making changes just so that on the front end, we have a lot less time wasted. It's been made much easier because of electric cars. It turns out cell phones like tiny little parts that go on boards that never bend. Electric cars, they want to have everything visually inspectable, changeable, and all that kind of stuff. So the parts are bigger and they're much easier to deal with and they're much more hardy. Yeah, redesign, it's really been working. It doesn't affect you much because you get it after we got it working. But it was a bit, it's been a big deal for us. If we ever want to scale up, if continuums get popular enough that you want to produce more of them, you can't have this thing where every one is a week's worth of work of screwing around with things. And that's really a solved thing. I really like the fact that this one doesn't have those parts because this is a recent one, but the part that caused us the most problem, the chip package is called the 666, SOT666, which I should have noticed. It's like, oh, well, maybe this is a warning. Anyway, so they're all bigger now, and I thank the electric car industry. They're hoarding a lot of chips, especially these audio chips, but at the same time, yeah, at least they like the things I like. Another thing I did is because these barrel connectors for power are a hassle because we buy a bunch of them, we have to test them for weeks at a time to make sure that they're really good and stuff. Where the USB power is just much more reliable and it's a cute little thing. So anyway, so we're on the newest ones. We're going to use USB power. Makes zero difference for the performance, the continuum and stuff. But boy, it makes it a lot easier on the front end. So the USB-C stuff, the power delivery stuff is really nice. One of the big things is that these are higher voltage, so you have much less current going through because it's a higher voltage going through the wires, and everything just works better. It's just way superior. So that's that. But again, there's no real difference there. A lot of these changes are for our for making our job easier. Okay. So I'm going to end this talk with two things that don't have anything to do with what's new, but two topics that I think are sort of underrepresented. And unfortunately, terminology is always bad because people use the same terms in different ways. So I will just use these terms, and I'm sure that some of you use these terms differently. But I think there's a really important idea here, which I've had for the continuum for a long time. I know Ed has designed all sorts of presets that take this organic idea seriously, but not every preset needs to be organic in the sense that I'm saying here, but I think it's a really important idea for what is performance, because I'm constantly hearing this thing, oh, it sounds just like a violin. So, this idea that you can replace a violin with something that sounds like a violin. Look, what's interesting about a violin performance is how you interact with the instrument. And, you know, if you hear a great violinist, whether you're playing a Stradivarius or $100 Chinese violin, makes very little difference compared to the quality of the performance. It's just how do you interact with the instrument? And in fact, the big difference there is they can interact better with the with the expensive violin, but realistically, that's not where the interest is. And there's this real, I think, confusion. I love sound design. I love all sorts of things. You know, we worked on the Egan matrix like crazy, but the real thing is how do you interact with it? Gestural or organic. So this word gestural is used all the time, and here I'm saying, you know, this is sort of the MPE world of controllers, and it's sort of this ideal. And in fact, they call it an MPE controller. I mean, it's right in the name. You know, it's a performer is controlling the sound. So it's a cause and effect system. You've got the controller, you've got a performer who's imposing this upon the sound. And it's a one-way thing. It's a cause and effect. Where in organic, in the sense I'm talking about here, which at least for me is one of the ideals for the continuum and Egan matrix, again, doesn't have to be in every preset, but I think it's a very important idea, is that the performer is in a tight timbre feedback loop. Now, that means several things, but one thing is that, yeah, it has to be a fast loop. It has, you know, there's all sorts of things that the scanning of whatever controller you have has to be fast. You need millisecond or sub-millisecond response times for what you're doing. But the really important thing is it's a circular relationship. If you think of, let's see, I got some lists here. If you think of a trumpeter playing, much of what a trumpeter does is respond to the instrument. You know, they want to play some note or something, but in order to keep the sound going, they have to respond to what the instrument is doing, or the sound's going to go away. They're not just saying, do this. You know, they're part of this loop, and much of the skill of playing trumpet isn't that you tell it what to do, but it's responding to the instrument and really that interaction. Or violinist, like if you're playing and you know, just to even get a good sound out of your bowing, depending on how loud you're playing and how the music is changing and stuff, you've got to respond all the time with bow pressure and with other, maybe where you're bowing on the string, on all these things. And that's really particular to that instrument. And, you know, this idea that there's this generic idea of playing expressive and, you know, you can press the trumpet button or the violin button, to me is a silly idea. It's actually a destructive idea. It's really, this genericity, I think, is a big mistake. And is one of the reasons why electronic performance is more boring than acoustic performance. If you got a singer, it's the same thing, even for a thereminist, just to even get the right pitch. You have to listen. If you know, in every situation, okay, the VLEV, I guess, is better than what was before, but all the same, you know, if you're not listening, you're not going to get the right pitches. And so you're in this feedback loop for the most, in fact, it's one of the brilliant things for theremin is back then he couldn't make an in-tune oscillator, but he could make the person make it in tune. And that's brilliant, you know, put the person in feedback loop, but that's much of the beauty of what you're hearing when you listen to theremin playing. And, you know, you can do all the theremin recordings you want and have a super sampler record every theremin thing you ever thought of, and you can try to play it with your mouse on your continue, but, you know, it's just not going to be the same. You really want to, so anyway, so this idea of what I'm calling organic here is very important. Now, what it means for the synthesizer and for the keyboard, you know, for the whole synthesizer keyboard thing is, or for the continuum has, is that it can mean it has to be fast, which is, you know, in some parts of the sound, or it can have to be very accurate in other parts of the sound. And those are different things too. There's a lot of confusion. Oh, I want 14-bit accuracy all the time. If you have a thing that puts out 14-bit accuracy all the time, I can guarantee you your attacks are no good. Because your attack pressure changes quickly during, and needs to be, you know, you need new attack values very quickly, amplitude values during the attack. But during a sustain, you might need 14-bit amplitude values. During the attack, you're wasting your bandwidth and you're wasting time. You're actually wrecking the sound by doing what we like to call 14-bit accuracy. So that's that. So that's just some thoughts. I don't know if anybody responds to that. I know my terminology might be a little funny, but we actually do pretty well with organic with the Egan matrix. And, you know, but I think it's easy to miss that. especially as we expand into keyboards and other instruments control the Egan matrix. So another thing I would like to mention, which will come up in a talk, is the Martineau had the touche, which is a fantastic thing. On the Continuum, for quite a while now, we've had this idea of the touch area. We couldn't call it touche because that's confusing. We couldn't call it touche because Expressive E already used that word, which is cute, but so we call it touch area, which is like the most boring thing possible. But, because all of it's, but whatever, it started with T. But the idea there is that rather than having, your left and right hand all playing notes, that you have your left hand supplying more control. And you have an example piece, right, for this?
Yeah, we're going to play this Prokofiev piece.
Yeah, go ahead and just play it. Just play it.
No.
Watch what Ed is doing. He's doing this controls the left hand. The left hand isn't playing notes, but it really, because there's this hand separation on the Martineau, but there's a hand separation on the violin and lots of acoustic instruments. And there's a real beauty. That's a limitation in a way, but it's also a real beauty.
You want to show what it was like with your left hand, right hand before we?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, it's over here, it's like, this idea, it's in the Martineau. It's not a really foreign idea of people using two hands doing different things. I mean, fundamentally, when you think about a violin, it's a similar thing where you're getting all your pitch and vibrato and information from your left hand, and from the right hand, you're getting timbre variance and amplitude, and to divide them up. So I find I decided to imitate that behavior, and it's been continued for some time. I've had initially when I did these things, I did this stretch string sound, which is really just a variation on the violin, viola, cello, bass sound that we have in there. But the control for pitch comes from this side, and the control from the amplitude comes from when you touch in this area. And it gives you a lot of flexibility to really control dynamics from one particular area. But it also means that you have you can use the advantages that we have within the three-dimensional control of the continuum to do variances in the timbre of the sound. So much like with a string player, when they would bow, they would bow closer to the bridge to get a brighter, brittle sound, or they would bow with more of the bow in order to get a darker sound closer to the middle of the string. And of course, varying the pressure on it. So there's a lot of cross relationships there. It also came about from, the continuum is really hard to play polyphonically. Maybe you can do it duophonically, triphonically, but boy, your brain just can't split and keep track of all these that pitch information. So it takes advantage of the polyphonic aspect of this playing surface, yet at the same time creating this monophonic source. So we have a touch area that I can I just find it a really nice, expressive way to get to play, to get life. So we prepared this piece, this Prokofiev, which I heard played by these two amazing violinists like a couple months ago at the university where I teach, and man, I hadn't heard this Prokofiev. It's like early Prokofiev. And it was just like such a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful way that the two instruments are kind of like, I would akin it to like if you see two butterflies going, which one's on top, which it doesn't matter. Like it's like, you call one part violin 1 and violin 2, but in actual fact, I'm violin one is only violin one because it starts first. So they're both easy. So we'll give this one a shot. Yeah, now your level, right?
No.
And what we've got set up here is we're using our ohms to essentially have the sound from Rob and this one and the sound from me, which is not a very radical concept. Hey, we've got an independent sound source for each instrument.
Yes, the child's got his own.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. This is that.
Alright. We'll finish this Curtis one.
Well, I guess that's it for my night. Do you want to take a short break, or what do you want to do for instruction? Okay,
I can give a quick update on micro.
go for it.
Just want to give a quick update for those of you who are in the Eurorack and are interested in the micro CDC module, which was developed jointly between Lippold and myself. The micro CDC is still in production. We've had some issues with parts availability over the last year or two. I think that's been resolved temporarily, but one component that's on the micro CDC has gone obsolete. I bought a wheel of about 150 or 200 pieces of that part. Luckily from the more inexpensive components over there, but I don't know for those to last through the next couple of batches of micro CDC. But also want to do is most of the people that are watching this later on video to get questions about this. I'm currently building all the micro CDCs are still built by hand. I hand solder all the parts, including that SOT 666 part that was talked about. It's also 666 because it's built out of solder.
Is that the base or package?
That is the package shape. Yeah, it's a 6-pin part. It's about the size of an 0603 resistor.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so the big news in our Julia and my personal life is that after attending ContinuuCon in Portugal last year, we fell in love with Portugal, bought a house there, and we are moving. So that will affect the production of the micro CDC module and all the other Evicon technology modules that I make. I'm currently working on a batch for current orders. I will attempt to make one more batch before I leave, and then it will probably be several months, I would think, until I get my new lab set up. But the plan is to continue to make those. Lippold and I have a plan to eventually replace that. There's an I2C to SPI converter chip that's gone obsolete. To replace that, there'll have to be a firmware change that supports that. That will be completely transparent to anybody who's using one. It will just plug in and work the same as the rest of them. But I just want to give that real quick update because I've had a lot of questions. I've had people asking, is it even still available? And just we've had a good bit of upheaval in the last year, and that's kind of why we're a little bit behind schedule. But rest assured, we're going to continue to make those because it's a really good product. Sold a ton of them, and hope to continue to do that and keep doing these events. That was it.